Seren Emberwind fought the trembling controls, knuckles pale against the dashboard as her battered survey shuttle screamed through the writhing storms of Vera 9. Streaks of charged lightning flashed past the fractured canopy, illuminating her tall, crimson-skinned form in relentless pulses of blood-red light. Emergency indicators flickered and danced, casting cruel shadows over the pointed tips of her vulpine ears and the trembling sweep of her tail. The onboard AI, its voice frigid and detached, intoned, 41% chance of survival. Just my luck, Seren muttered through gritted teeth, every muscle tensed as the ground surged up to meet her. The shuttle hit the underbrush with a force that rattled her bones, tearing through moss-draped branches and shattering against half-buried boulders. The harness cut into her chest, holding her as the world spun and her vision blurred. Smoke snaked through hairline cracks in the canopy, searing her lungs with every desperate breath. A monstrous bellow, deep, guttural, impossibly loud, shuddered through the hull. Seren froze, suspended upside down, heart thundering. She fumbled with the harness, fingers slick with sweat, panic rising as the silhouette of something huge and furred loomed beyond the broken viewport. The beast's shadow flickered against the storm-lit undergrowth, drawing nearer with each thunderous footstep. She whispered a plea in her native tongue, voice quivering, willing herself to disappear before the monster found a way in. Another growl, closer, vibrating through the twisted metal, sent her pulse racing. She braced herself, but then a human voice cut through the chaos. "Mace, easy!" The rumbling stilled. Seren blinked, disoriented, as the emergency hatch wrenched open with a tortured screech. Rain hissed through the breach, cold and sharp. A man's silhouette framed the storm, haloed by distant flashes. He moved with purpose, broad-shouldered, lean, face streaked with grime and rainwater, eyes dark and warm as obsidian. He crouched, reaching in with a steady hand. "Are you injured?" Seren stared at him, trying to focus past the ringing in her ears, the strength in his arms, the quiet confidence. He looked like he belonged here, in this chaos. But before she could answer, the beast's head shoved into the opening behind him. Immense, fur matted and coarse, eyes intelligent and watchful. Seren gasped, a startled squeak escaping her lips. The man, Callan Drake, offered a gentle, reassuring smile. "That's just Mace. He's my companion. Looks scary, but he's a gentle giant." There was a hint of mischief in his voice, as if daring her to believe something so absurd. Seren managed to stammer. "Seren Emberwind? Xenoanthropologist, second tier." The words felt clumsy, her mouth dry as sand. Callan was already assessing the wreck, eyes quick and efficient. "Let's get you out of here." "Shuttle's not looking too stable." The hull groaned, steel protesting under its own weight. Seren hesitated, but Callan's hand was right there. Strong, calloused, and warm even through the chill. She grasped it, startled by the jolt of heat that shot up her arm. He braced himself, pulling her free with a careful steadiness that made her feel weightless for a moment. The ground, when it met her, was spongy with moss and treacherous with hidden stones. Her knees buckled, a wave of dizziness threatening to topple her, but Callan's arm slipped around her waist, anchoring her with unshakable strength. "You're safe now," he murmured, voice low and steady, his heartbeat strong against her side. For one suspended moment she almost believed him. Mace, the beast, padded closer, shoulders broad as a shuttle bulkhead, paws the size of Seren's head. She stiffened instinctively, breath caught in her throat. Callan kept his arm gently around her. "He tracked your distress beacon. Saved your life, really." Seren, curiosity flickering through her fear, noticed a cluster of metallic nodes embedded along Mace's shaggy skull, their surfaces alive with faint pulses of bioluminescence. "Neural augmentations?" she murmured, unable to hide her fascination. Callan grinned, pride softening the edges of his rugged features. Interface nodes were linked. Share senses, sometimes emotions, makes us a true team. He gave Mace's thick fur an affectionate scratch. The beast responded with a deep, contented rumble, lowering his massive head as if inviting Seren's inspection. The shuttle creaked ominously behind them. Callan's hold on Seren tightened. "We need to move. Night's falling fast, and it's a 2-day trek to the relay station. Can you walk?" Seren steadied herself, reluctant to let go of the security of his touch. "I think so," she said, voice wavering with exhaustion and adrenaline. "Good." Callan's hand lingered at her side, guiding her gently away from the wreckage. "Stick close. Mace will alert us to trouble. And I won't let anything happen to you." There was a conviction in his tone that made her cheeks flush, a flutter in her chest she couldn't entirely blame on fear. Dusk crawled over the alien landscape, painting the jagged ridges in bruised purples and black. Callan led the way along a rocky spine, his steps silent and sure, his silhouette cutting a path through the encroaching gloom. Seren's senses were heightened. Every brush of his arm, every glance back to check on her making her hyper-aware of the man at her side. When the terrain grew treacherous, he offered his hand, palm warm and steady, helping her down a slope slick with lichen. The contact sent sparks up her crimson fingers, and she found herself grasping his hand a little longer than necessary. Trying to steady her breathing, Seren nodded toward Mace, who moved with uncanny silence for something so large. "Those neural nodes? They allow you to communicate?" Callan's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm before he released her. "More than that. Emotions, sometimes even memories, if the link is strong. He knows when I'm afraid, when I need him to be gentle or fierce." There was quiet reverence in his voice, a bond deeper than words. Before Seren could ask more, Mace's posture shifted, ears pricking, nostrils flaring. Callan's body tensed in an instant, years of survival instinct flowing through every movement. He pressed something into her palm, a compact stunner, lightweight but deadly. "Just in case," he whispered, gaze intense. A sudden cacophony of shrieks split the shadows ahead, pack hunters, sleek and many-legged, their eyes glittering with predatory light. Seren's heart pounded as Callan positioned himself between her and the threat, shielding her with his body. Mace surged forward, neural nodes flickering, and let loose a roar that shook the very ground. The sound was primal, resonant, a wall of force that made the underbrush shudder. The pack hesitated, wavered. One, bolder than the rest, crept forward, jaws agleam. Mace bellowed again, louder, a rolling thunder that sent the creatures scattering into the dusk. Callan reached up, scratching Mace's fur, the beast nudging him with a pleased, rumbling huff. "See? Big softy," he said, glancing at Seren, who could only stare, wide-eyed. On her world, such a partnership was impossible, unthinkable. Callan checked the sky, tension lingering in the lines of his jaw. "We need shelter. Those things might come back." He studied her face, eyes searching. "You all right?" His voice was softer now, intimate despite the storm and darkness. Seren tried to answer, but her legs trembled beneath her, adrenaline and exhaustion threatening to spill over. Callan caught her easily, one arm steadying her, his fingers gentle as he brushed a stray lock from her face, the touch lingering near the base of her ear. The contact sent a shiver racing through her, far deeper than fear. "There's a ranger's shelter about an hour ahead," he promised, voice a quiet anchor in the chaos. She nodded, breathless, pulse racing for reasons she couldn't name. And with Callan's steady presence at her side, and Mace's silent protection at her back, she pressed forward into the coming night. The shelter was a sturdy outpost, its weathered durasteel bones fused seamlessly into the jagged cliffside as if nature herself had shaped it. Callan keyed in the code, a metallic chime signaling the ancient lock's surrender. As the heavy door slid open, a gust of wind followed them inside, swirling rain and the sharp scent of ozone. Mace ducked his massive head, squeezing through the wide entryway with an awkward dignity that made Seren's lips twitch despite her exhaustion. Inside, the place was utilitarian but welcoming. Rough-hewn benches bolted to the stone, a battered heater humming in the corner, a rack of emergency supplies neatly stowed. The walls were lined with old relief maps and scuffed rescue gear, relics of explorers long gone. Before Seren could protest, Callan was already shrugging off his jacket and draping it over her shoulders. The fabric enveloped her, heavy and faintly scented with him. Earth, smoke, something warm and steady beneath. "You look chilled," Callan said, offering no room for argument. His voice was gentle, but his eyes watched her for any sign of protest. Seren opened her mouth to object, but the warmth seeping through the jacket was too inviting. She hugged it close, glancing shyly at him, her tail curling around her legs as she perched on the edge of the nearest bench. Mace circled once before settling beside the heater, his bulk fitting snugly between wall and radiator. He exhaled a sigh that vibrated the floor, curling his great shaggy body protectively around the humming core. Callan moved with quiet assurance, checking the control panel, priming the water recycler, setting the kettle on the heating pad. Every motion was efficient but unhurried, as if he'd done this 100 times before. Seren watched him, feeling the tension in her shoulders ebb in the shelter's safety. In a few minutes, Callan returned with 2 steaming mugs. Their fingers brushed as he handed her one, and the contact made Seren's cheeks heat, though she pretended not to notice. She accepted the drink with a nod of thanks, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "Thank you," she said softly. "My people. We're not used to accepting help, especially from humans or beasts." Her gaze flicked to Mace, whose neural nodes pulsed in time with the heater's light. Callan settled beside her, close enough that his presence radiated through her. "Yet you crossed the stars to study alien life," he said with a half grin. "That doesn't sound like someone ruled by fear." Seren's ears tilted in acknowledgement, her gaze thoughtful. "My research challenges our beliefs. Where I come from, interspecies bonds are rare, feared even. But I can't help wondering what we're missing by clinging to those walls." Outside, thunder rolled over the cliffs, the wind rising to a howl that rattled the shelter's frame. The heater's light flickered as the power grid strained against the tempest. Mace grumbled in response, curling tighter, his fur rippling with every rumble of thunder. Callan rose and checked the weather monitors, frowning as a red warning glowed across the display. "Major tempest incoming. Looks like we're staying put tonight." He secured the shutters, double-checked the seals, every movement a silent reassurance. A jagged bolt of lightning struck somewhere close, the shelter reverberating with the impact. Seren jumped, her mug sloshing dangerously. Callan was beside her in an instant, his arms slipping around her shoulders, steadying her against his side. "You're safe here," he murmured, his voice low and certain. The words wrapped around her like another layer of warmth. Seren let herself lean into him, her head finding the steady rise and fall of his chest. His heartbeat was slow and strong beneath her cheek, a living metronome that drew her back from the edge of anxiety. The storm outside faded to a distant threat, drowned out by the nearness of him. Callan's hand traced soothing patterns along her shoulder, his touch neither hurried nor hesitant. "So," he said softly, "tell me about your work. What's so dangerous about asking questions?" Seren hesitated, her gaze drawn to the swirling patterns in her mug. My findings suggest that the fear prey species feel toward predators isn't as absolute as we believe. There are exceptions, cooperation, even trust. But to admit that, it undermines our entire social order. She risked a glance up at him, finding only curiosity in his eyes. Callan's fingers gently traced the edge of her ear, the gesture sending an unexpected thrill through her. "You've already changed, you know," he said. "Your terror of Mace. Gone. Now it's curiosity. And your fear of me." He grinned. "Well, that's something else entirely, isn't it?" Seren's pulse fluttered, and she tried to hide a smile. "Perhaps." "I'm still analyzing the data." He reached up, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand, tilting her face to his. His thumb lingered, catching the tremor in her breath. "Seren," he breathed, her name a promise in the hush between thunderclaps. As if on cue, the lights flickered once, twice, then died, plunging the shelter into darkness. The heater's glow faded, and only the muffled rage of the storm remained. Seren clung to Callan's shirt, her eyes wide as they adjusted to the gloom. A faint outline of his smile appeared, illuminated by the faint luminescence of Mace's neural nodes. "Good timing," Callan whispered, neither moving away nor letting go. The shelter felt smaller, more intimate, the storm a distant thing. Seren rested her head on his shoulder, content to remain in the cocoon of his presence, listening to the rain hammer the cliffside and the slow, steady rhythm of his breath. Dawn crept in slow and silver, filtering through the cracks in the shutters, painting the shelter with the pale promise of a new day. The world outside looked transformed. Rocks glittered with frost, the air sharp and clean. Callan stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, watching for danger while Seren tried to raise her institute on the comm terminal. She keyed in the codes, her voice calm but determined as she called for a response. The static returned only silence, no record of her mission, no acknowledgement from home. Her brow furrowed, ears flicking with frustration. "They're not receiving me. The core AI should have sent an automatic distress call the moment I crashed, but nothing." Callan's expression tightened as realization dawned. "You think your shuttle's AI was tampered with?" Seren's gaze sharpened, worry and anger mingling. "The system logs are gone. It's as if I was never here." Behind them, Mace's neural nodes pulsed with a sharper light, his massive head swiveling toward the door. The low growl rumbling from his chest was not the contented sound of before. It was a warning. Callan straightened, voice urgent. "We need to check the wreck. If someone sabotaged the AI, they may want to erase every trace you were ever on Vera 9. Seren's fatigue was palpable. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes shadowed by worry and sleeplessness, but she met Callan's gaze with fierce resolve. "I'm coming with you. I need to see it for myself." She stepped forward, her chin lifted, every inch the stubborn scientist who had crossed the stars. Callan's expression softened. He cupped her cheek in his palm, thumb brushing gently over her skin. "You're relentless," he said with a fond smile. She leaned into his touch, heart pounding. "And you're protective." He let his hand linger a moment longer before nodding, understanding flowing between them in the silence. Together, they gathered what little gear they had, Mace rising and shaking out his fur, the morning light catching on the metallic nodes above his brow. The trek back to the crash site was tense, every shadow a potential threat. Callan moved ahead, his eyes scanning the undergrowth, while Seren followed, her stride growing stronger with each step. He found himself glancing back, drawn by her grace, the way she navigated the rough terrain, the determination in every line of her posture. Halfway there, Seren stumbled on a loose stone. Callan caught her with swift reflexes, his hands steadying her waist. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the warmth of his grip, the rush of their shared breath. She looked up at him, gratitude and something deeper shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her hand finding his. Their moment was shattered by a sudden guttural growl. Mace's ears pricked, his massive body blocking the path ahead. Callan released Seren, senses sharp as he surveyed the ground. Someone had been at the wreck. The moss was disturbed, footprints pressed into the mud. Human, but not Callan's. The shuttle's torn hull bore fresh scratches, tools left abandoned in the dirt. The evidence was clear. Someone had come looking for something, and they hadn't cared to hide it. Seren and Callan exchanged a glance, unspoken alarm passing between them. Mace's growl deepened, the storm of the night now nothing compared to the gathering tension around the broken shuttle. At the crash site, chaos reigned. Torn panels and scattered circuitry littered the mossy ground, evidence of sabotage more brazen than either of them had feared. Seren darted forward, the urgency in her stride belying her exhaustion. She stepped over coils of charred wiring and bent steel, her crimson hands trembling as she pried open the ruined consoles. Callan's eyes swept the clearing, every muscle taut, Mace looming behind them. Silent, watchful, his neural nodes pulsing with agitation. Seren's breath caught. "It's gone," she whispered, voice raw as she stared at the empty cavity where the AI core had been. She dropped to her knees, scanning for any sign, any clue. Her gaze snagged on a distinctive scorch pattern burned into the decking, an arc of blackened metal that didn't match the crash, but spoke of a deliberate, targeted charge. A branch snapped beyond the wreck. Mace's head jerked up, his hackles rising. His roar split the silence, echoing against the rocks, but it was drowned by the sharper crack of human voices and the unmistakable whine of stunfire. A searing bolt of energy slashed through the hull, sending fragments of polyalloy skittering across the floor. Callan reacted in an instant, tackling Seren and dragging her behind the fractured bulkhead. They landed in a tangled heap, her slender frame pressed tight against his, the scent of smoke and storm still clinging to her hair. Stunfire sizzled overhead, the threat palpable. But for a heartbeat he felt only the frantic rhythm of her breath and the heat of her body against his. Seren grinned despite the chaos, her voice a breathless whisper in his ear. "Still think I should have stayed behind at the shelter?" Callan managed a wry smile, lips brushing her temple. Terrible timing for that argument. He hesitated, then added, "But you belong at my side." Outside, Mace's bellow grew thunderous. The attackers' shouts broke, replaced by the frantic scuffle of boots on stone. Another pulse of neural light flared from the beast's skull, and the air filled with the sound of panic. Stunfire turning wild, then abruptly dying as the attackers broke and ran. The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. Callan pushed himself up, urgency sharpening his touch as he helped Seren to her feet. Those weren't scavengers. Too coordinated, too well-armed. He scanned the ground, eyes narrowing as Seren bent to retrieve a charred component from the deck. She turned it over in her hand, the silver casing stamped with a familiar sigil. "This is corporate tech. Encrypted relay hardware. Someone high up wanted my research erased." Her voice shook with anger and something deeper. Betrayal. Callan reached out, silencing her with a finger pressed gently to her lips. The spark that leapt between them was electric, lingering even as he pulled away. Later. "Now we run!" A crash announced Mace's return, the beast bulldozing aside what was left of the shuttle's flank. Without hesitation, Callan boosted Seren onto the creature's broad, warm back, swinging up behind her in a single, fluid motion. "Hold on," he murmured, his arm anchoring her waist, his lips close enough that she felt his breath against her ear. Her entire body melted against him, the fear replaced by the wild rush of his nearness as Mace surged into motion. The world blurred, trees and boulders flashing past as the great beast thundered deeper into the hills. Wind stung Seren's face, and she clung to Callan's arm, her heart slamming with every stride. Only when they reached a hidden hollow, tucked away beneath a screen of overhanging vines and ancient stone, did Mace slow, finally coming to a halt. Callan swung down first, then reached up to help Seren. Her legs nearly buckled as she dismounted, the adrenaline drain leaving her shaky and lightheaded. Callan caught her elbows, steadying her, but his gaze dropped to the crimson smear across his forearm. Blood, fresh and bright. Seren's eyes widened. "That's my fault. I distracted you, He caught her hand before she could pull away, his grip gentle but unyielding. "No more hiding," he said, voice low. "It's time for the truth, don't you think?" Seren's eyes shimmered, uncertainty and resolve warring within her. She drew a shaky breath, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "My research. It's not just about cooperation between species. I discovered that the fear-prey species feel for predators. It was engineered. Genetically. Barriers built into our DNA, designed to keep us divided, easy to control." Her voice trembled. The corporation knew. They hid it for generations. Callan absorbed the words, every muscle in his body tightening. "That means the crash. None of this was an accident. Your work, your life. It threatens the entire power structure." Seren nodded, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. "I always wondered why humans could bond with predators, why I felt drawn to things I was told to fear. Now I know. The programming never took in you, or me." Her words faded, voice breaking as the weight of isolation pressed in. Callan stepped close, pulling her into his arms. She fit perfectly against him, her tears soaking into the fabric of his shirt. He stroked her hair, his touch an anchor in the storm of revelations. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered, his fingers gently cupping her face. He tilted her chin up, his lips brushing hers with a softness that belied the chaos around them. Their kiss was raw with hope and defiance, a promise in the midst of danger. Serene's hands tangled in his jacket, clinging to the only thing that felt real. When they parted, she hesitated, fear and longing warring in her eyes. Callan's thumb traced her cheek. "Don't stop," he urged, his voice rough. Before she could answer, a branch cracked nearby. Mace's ears flattened, a warning growl rumbling deep in his chest. In the distance, heavy boots and muffled orders signaled the approach of corporate security. Callan pulled Seren behind him, shielding her with his body as the brush parted and armed figures fanned out into the hollow. Their leader strode forward, Director Soren, her uniform immaculate, her gaze cold as steel. "Seren Emberwind," Soren called, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to obedience. "Surrender the component. You have no idea what you're interfering with." She barely spared Callan a glance, dismissing him as irrelevant. Seren squared her shoulders, fire blazing in her eyes as she held up the stolen relay. "This is proof. My research is out, and you can't erase it. I won't let you." Her voice was steady, unyielding. Soren's lip curled in disdain. "Your research will never see the light of day. Stand down, and perhaps your companion will be spared." She gestured to the security team, weapons trained on Callan and Mace. Mace bared his teeth, neural nodes flaring with blue-white fire. He moved between his people and danger, his massive form a living shield. Seren's hand found Callan's, their fingers twining, a silent promise as they stood together in the face of the threat. The hollow crackled with tension, Mace's roar echoing as the security team advanced, and Seren and Callan braced themselves, united, unbroken, ready to fight for the truth. Mace tore through the dense woods, his paws pounding the earth in a relentless rhythm. Stun fire flashed behind them, streaks of blue-white slicing through the tangled undergrowth. Seren clung to Callan, her arms locked tight around his waist, their bodies moving in perfect sync with Mace's powerful, lunging strides. Every jolt, every turn sent them closer together, the heat of their shared desperation humming beneath her skin. Callan's voice was a low growl at her ear, urgent but calm. "They're driving us west, toward the old research station." Seren's ears flicked as she remembered grainy maps and faded mission logs. "There's a canyon up ahead. If we cut left at the split, we can reach the station through the rocks. It's the only way out if they block the main trail." He shot her an admiring glance over his shoulder. "You're brilliant. Hold tight." Branches whipped past, shadows darting between the trees. Mace veered left, responding to a subtle squeeze from Callan's knees, his massive body twisting with impossible agility. The sound of pursuit grew fainter as the terrain grew rougher, boulders and steep gullies forming a natural labyrinth. Security teams scrambled behind, but none could match the beast's pace. They lost their pursuers at the heart of the rocky maze. The world narrowed to the sound of their breathing and Mace's steady thunder. At last, the abandoned research station rose from the brush, weathered but whole, its battered walls streaked with old storm scars. The air was thick with dust and silence. Callan slid down first, landing lightly and turning to help Seren. His hands lingered at her waist, steadying her as her feet touched the ground. She found herself reluctant to let go, their eyes meeting in the hush that followed their escape. Above them, Mace rumbled a gentle encouragement, nudging Seren's shoulder with a velvet muzzle before sprawling in the dust, content for the first time since the chase began. "We made it," Callan breathed, his relief evident. Seren managed a shaky smile. "For now." Inside, Callan swept the entry, checking every door and window, bolting them with practiced efficiency. Seren knelt beside Mace, her attention drawn to the flicker of his neural array. She reached for the delicate lattice of biometal and light, pausing with uncertainty. "May I?" she asked softly. Mace dipped his head in answer, eyelids fluttering half-closed. With reverence, Seren traced the intricate tech woven beneath the thick fur, fingertips brushing the luminous filaments. The neural nodes pulsed beneath her touch, responsive and alive. Callan joined her, crouching on Mace's far side. "It's not about control," he explained, voice pitched low for her alone. "It's about trust. The interface lets us share senses, sometimes feelings. When we're truly in sync, there's no barrier, just understanding." Seren marveled, eyes wide. "On my world, such a bond is unthinkable. We were taught to fear what we couldn't dominate." Callan smiled, his hand covering hers, the warmth of his skin blending with Mace's living heat. He guided her, showing her how to press gently, how to focus her intention. "It's about letting go. You don't lead. Mace doesn't follow. You move together." For a long moment, the three of them existed in perfect connection, Seren's hand in Callan's, both resting on Mace's skull. The lines between them blurred. Predator, prey, human, Xeno. The moment was broken only by a distant tremor, a muffled boom that rattled the station's bones. Callan's expression sharpened. "They're sweeping the canyon. We don't have much time." Seren's mind raced, her memory sifting through floor plans and old escape protocols. She looked at Callan, determination lighting her face. "There's a service duct beneath the east wing. It leads out past the main entrance. They'll never expect us to double back." He caught on instantly, a grin flashing across his face. "You're sure?" She didn't hesitate. "Let's prove what we can do together." He pulled her to him, kissing her hard, a swift, fierce collision of hope and adrenaline. "For luck," he murmured. They moved as a single unit. Seren's keen hearing mapped the patrols outside. Callan coordinated their timing, his voice low and precise. Mace responded instantly to Seren's hand signals, his neural nodes flickering with anticipation. They slipped through the service duct, Seren leading, Mace barely fitting, Callan bringing up the rear. At every turn, they anticipated one another, their trust seamless. Rain hammered the metal as they emerged on the far side of the canyon, the sky split by the approaching storm. Behind them, security teams fanned out in confusion, their quarry vanished into the gathering darkness. Seren laughed, a wild, exultant sound, full of adrenaline and triumph. The fear that had ruled her for so long was gone, replaced by exhilaration. Callan swept her into his arms, crushing his lips to hers in a kiss that tasted of rain and victory. "This is what we're meant for," he whispered, his forehead pressed to hers. Mace lifted his massive head and roared, the sound echoing through the canyons, defiant and free. Thunder split the sky, and the storm struck with savage force. Gale winds battered the canyon, pelting them with debris and stinging rain. Callan grabbed Seren's hand, dragging her toward a rocky ledge. Mace lunged beside them, sheltering them with his great body as they pressed into the stone. "Get down!" Callan shouted, flattening himself against the rock. He pulled Seren into the curve of his body, holding her fast. Mace curled around them, growling as the storm raged, his bulk a living shield. Seren buried her face in Callan's chest, clinging to him as the world shook. His arms were tight around her, hands tangled in her hair, breath hot against her temple. "I've got you," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. Lightning flashed, illuminating the three of them entwined, human, Xeno, beast. The fear that once divided them was gone, swept away by the raw force of survival and choice. As the storm faded, the world emerged transformed. The canyon floor was altered, old scars erased, new paths revealed. Seren lifted her head, breathless and wild, eyes shining with possibility. She grinned, brushing her fingers over Callan's jaw. "If this is what going wild looks like, I think I could get used to it." He laughed, the sound deep and free. "Maybe we were never meant to be tamed." She kissed him softly, lingering, the promise of freedom in her touch. "We were meant to be free," she breathed. Mace rumbled in agreement, his neural nodes pulsing with contentment. Callan and Seren, hands entwined, rested together beneath the open sky, knowing they belonged here, not behind walls, wild, unbroken, and utterly together. At sunrise, the world was silver and still, the storm-washed air filled with the scent of damp earth and new beginnings. Seren stood on the ledge outside the canyon shelter, arms wrapped around herself, watching pale light creep over shattered rocks. Callan and Mace moved quietly in the background, gathering what little supplies remained, their presence grounding her as her mind raced with the weight of what was to come. A sudden chirp sliced through the hush, the communicator, long silent, now alive with encrypted static. Seren lifted it with trembling hands. A familiar voice crackled through, thin but urgent. "Seren, it's Aris. Extraction is arranged. I have a ship waiting at the northern plateau. Come now. You can present your findings. Save yourself, and maybe all of us." Seren's heart clenched. She looked back toward Callan, who watched her with quiet intensity, understanding already written on his face. The communicator buzzed again, Eris's voice fierce with conviction. "You know what's at stake. Our people, trapped for generations by the fear in their blood. Your research can free them. You must not waste this chance." Seren closed her eyes, torn. Duty warred with longing. Her entire life had been built around answers, but now she held something deeper. A living, breathing truth, standing behind her in the dawn. She barely heard Callan step closer. "You should go," he said gently, his voice thick. "This is bigger than us. You deserve to be safe. Your work, your people, need you. Seren's resolve hardened. No. My work proves what's possible, but you and Mace showed me what's real. Her hand closed over the communicator, knuckles white. I'm done running from who I am. Before Callan could protest, she turned, seized his face, and pressed her lips to his in a kiss fierce with decision, with everything she'd nearly lost. The communicator crushed beneath her fist, splintered plastic scattering to the ground. The message was clear. Her choice, irrevocable. A deep, resonant roar rolled from Mace's chest. He pressed his massive head against Serene's side, neural nodes glowing in bright approval. The bond between them, forged in fire and trust, needed no technology to define it. They turned their focus to the coming battle. Seren mapped the terrain with her sharp hearing. Callan set snares and pitfalls, every motion guided by the tacit language they had built together. Mace stalked the perimeter, neural array adapting, extending its resonance to include Seren, her thoughts, her senses, folding her into the team's silent communication. The three of them moved as one, anticipation pulsing between them. During a rare pause, they huddled in the shadow of a boulder. Callan brushed dust from Seren's cheek, his touch lingering. There's still time. You could run. She smiled, slow and certain. My mind was made up when you pulled me from that wreck. I spent my whole life looking for proof that we could change. But with you, and Mace, I don't just believe it. I know it. She kissed him then, unhurried and deep, imprinting herself into his memory. I'm right where I belong. Engines rumbled on the horizon, dropships, their silhouettes swelling in the dusk. Callan rose, offering his hand. Seren took it, her fingers twining with his. Mace flanked them, broad and unyielding. Together, they climbed to a vantage point as the first ships landed, hatches disgorging squads of armored troopers, weapons glinting in the dying light. Callan squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, we face it together. Serene's gaze swept the advancing enemy, and for the first time, she saw their fear, not just of her research, but of what she and Callan and Mace represented. The corporation's lie was unraveling, and the truth threatened everything they had built. From the front ranks, Director Soren strode forth, armor gleaming, eyes cold as obsidian. Seren Emberwind, he called, voice amplified across the rocks. You are under corporate sanction. Surrender your data and the beast. Return to your world and the human will be spared. Callan scoffed under his breath. Seren stepped forward, head high, tail bristling with defiance. You don't understand what you're fighting. You engineered division, fear, isolation. My people were never prey until you rewrote our blood. Soren's sneer was sharp. What you have is an aberration, an unnatural bond. It will be erased, as it should have been from the beginning. Seren's voice rang out, clear and steady. You can erase data. You can destroy ships. But you can't unmake what we've become. You only made us believe we should be afraid. It never had to be this way. Soren's face twisted. He gestured, and his troops fanned out, weapons raised. Kill them. Let the next generation learn from their failure. The attack came swift and brutal. Stun fire sizzled through the night, but Seren's keen hearing mapped every squad, her voice directing Callan and Mace. Mace moved like living thunder, intercepting attackers, neural nodes flaring with each blow. Callan's tactics were poetry, using terrain, timing, the very patterns of fear the corporation had engineered against them. Seren darted through the chaos, senses extending, her presence a bridge between predator and human. She called warnings, coordinated attacks, every step a refutation of the terror written in her DNA. In the heart of the battle, Soren confronted her, fury and desperation etched deep. You should be paralyzed by fear. he roared, firing his weapon wildly. Seren stood her ground, eyes blazing. You only made us believe we should be, but belief can change. You never understood that. She reached for the data core, activating the projection with a single touch. A shimmer of light burst across the battlefield, blueprints and gene maps flickering over rock and armor. Proof undeniable. Callan's voice rang out, amplified by every comm in the canyon. The truth is free. The network is spreading it now. Your hold is broken. Soren's scream was lost in the uproar. Kill them! Erase everything! But Mace lifted his head and roared, not in rage, but in harmony, a deep, resonant call that reverberated through the stones. From the shadows, more shapes emerged, beasts like Mace, each with a human companion at their side, and, most stunning of all, prey species walking beside predator, united in trust. It was not just Seren, Callan, and Mace. It was dozens, hundreds, a tide that the corporation could not stop. Seren faced Soren, triumph in her voice. We're not an anomaly. We're the future. The corporation's forces faltered, weapons dropping as some among them recognized friends, family, hope. The world had changed, not by force, but by the power the corporation had tried hardest to erase: trust, bond, and love. Side by side, Seren, Callan, and Mace stood in the dawn's new light, prey, predator, human, free at last, and ready to begin again. Months later, the research center overlooked a world transformed. Below its transparent domes and living glass terraces, broad fields of emerald and gold stretched to the horizon, dotted with figures, predator and prey working side by side, laughter and conversation carrying through the morning air. The old boundaries that had once defined every interaction, every law and custom, were fading into memory, replaced by the first uncertain but hopeful steps toward unity. Inside the sunlit atrium, Seren Emberwind's office pulsed with life. Screens scrolled with updates, data streams from every continent, reports of new neural adaptation clinics opening, and cross-species learning pods filled with bright-eyed children. The future she had once barely dared to imagine was unfolding before her, day by day. The doors parted with a soft hiss and Callan Drake strode in, every inch the corpsman in his crisp new Conservation Corps uniform, green and copper, badges gleaming, boots still dusted from the field. He tossed her a roguish grin, waving a data slate. 89% success rate in the new neural adaptation trials. Mace is going to be insufferable. Seren's smile was radiant, eyes aglow. 89%. That's beyond anything we projected. The first generation of children. We'll never know those old walls, Callan finished, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He swept her into his arms, spinning her once, and then pressed his forehead to hers. You did it, Seren. She slid her arms around his neck, her tail flicking in delight. We did it. You, me, Mace, and all those who refused to be afraid. He nuzzled her ear, breath warm. It's still unfair, how you can hear me coming down the hall before anyone else. He drew her closer, hands firm at her waist, teasing. And here I thought I was the stealth expert. She leaned into him, savoring the comfort of his embrace, the steady beat of his heart under her palm. You're just lucky I use my powers for good. A low, amused rumble interrupted them. Mace, far too large for the office, squeezed his head and shoulders through the doorway, golden eyes sparkling with mischief. His neural array glimmered in gentle waves, echoing the happiness in the room. Seren laughed, reaching out to scratch behind his ear. Jealous, old friend? Mace snorted, breath warm against her hand, then nudged both humans toward the hall with surprising delicacy for a creature of his size. Callan grinned, grabbing his jacket. He's right, we're late. Together, the three of them walked the curving corridors, passing clusters of scientists, teachers, and families, some with predator companions at their side, some prey children darting about with new friends, barriers gone. The assembly hall loomed ahead, vast and luminous, its seats filled with delegates from across the stars. They came in all colors and shapes, ambassadors and researchers eager to begin their own adaptation programs, to learn from the unlikely revolution that had begun on this world. Mace took up a dignified post near the dais, neural nodes gleaming as he surveyed the crowd. Callan squeezed Seren's hand, murmuring, "They're ready for you." She drew a steadying breath, then walked to the podium, her crimson skin aglow beneath the lights. For a moment, the hum of conversation faded. Every eye was on her. Prey, predator, human, hybrid. "A year ago," Seren began, her voice ringing clear through the hall, "I learned our fears were manufactured, that the lines between us were not natural law, but a cage built to keep us apart. Today, we begin true unity, not in theory, but in life." She paused, gaze drifting to Callan, who watched her with fierce pride, and to Mace, who radiated quiet support. Love swelled in her chest, so vast it was almost a pain. She let it anchor her, filling every word. "We were taught some lines could never be crossed, but I stand here as proof that love is stronger than programming, and trust more powerful than fear." She gestured to Mace and Callan, then to the rows of new bonded pairs whose neural arrays shimmered with hope and anticipation. "Look around. The future we fought for is real. Not because we conquered our differences, but because we embraced them." A hush filled the room, broken only by the soft pulse of neural light from dozens of new bonds, human and beast, predator and prey, the barriers that had ruled for generations crumbling. As the assembly broke into applause, Seren stepped down, breathless with relief and joy. Callan met her at the bottom of the steps, sweeping her into a kiss, quick and fierce. "You're a marvel," he whispered against her lips. Later, as the day gave way to night and the center's lights dimmed, Seren found herself on the open observation deck, high above the new world. Twin moons climbed the sky, their silver light bathing the gardens and forests below. Callan's arms encircled her from behind, drawing her close against his chest. Mace settled at their side, curling his massive body around them as a living windbreak. Callan tilted his head, brushing his lips against the shell of her ear. "Any regrets about joining the Corps?" His voice was soft, teasing, but underneath she heard the real question. Could she be happy with this life? With him? With all they'd built? Seren smiled, tracing the Conservation Corps insignia on his sleeve with a gentle finger. "Never. I want to help lead this change, not just watch it happen. To help others find what we found." He chuckled, tightening his embrace. "Safety is overrated anyway." She turned in his arms, smiling up at him, then kissed him, slow and deep, savoring the certainty of his warmth, the promise in his hands. "Freedom's better," she breathed. Mace rumbled his agreement, his neural array pulsing with contentment, the sound vibrating through the deck and their hearts alike. The three of them stood together beneath the moons, predator, prey, and human, at last, united. The old stories, the old fears, no longer define them. Callan pressed a kiss to Serene's hair, then looked up at the night. "I love you," he whispered, voice rough with honesty. "Both of you." Seren smiled, drawing both her companions close, the wildness of her heart matched only by the peace she'd found. "I love you too. Always." As the moons climbed higher, their silver light caught on entwined hands, on fur and skin, on the new bonds that stretched across a changed world. What they had made was more than science, more than rebellion. It was a family, chosen and found, proving that trust could rewrite fate itself. In the end, it was simple. Trust given and returned, love offered and accepted, family made in the wild as it was always meant to be.